It's time for Who's Who Tonight. Interesting topics, fascinating people. And now, your host of Who's Who Tonight, Mark Bishop.
Welcome to Who's Who Tonight. I'm Mark Bishop. Tonight's guest is from Baltimore, Maryland, who's been active in the music scene since 1965. He's been a member of several international acts, including the Little River Band and Player, as well as a member of actor and musician John Stamos' band Jesse and the Rippers, who just recently had a 20-year reunion performance on the popular show Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. He's written songs for the Bay City Rollers, Nigel Olsson, B.J. Thomas, and Tina Turner, amongst others. He also has written soundtracks for several movies and scored a top 10 hit in Japan. Will you please welcome singer, songwriter, performer, and record producer, Mr. Tony Sciuto. Tony, welcome to Who's Who Tonight.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Hey, man. Thanks for being here. You're originally from Baltimore, Maryland, correct?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was just a regular, normal kid. Except when I started to notice the radio, I say maybe when I was 7 or 8 years old, I just started to fall in love with music. And I equated it to the first girl I fell in love with. She was in the first grade. And there was a song on the radio. It was by Johnny Tillotson. It was called Poetry in Motion. And every time I heard that song, my heart would just pump. And I would think of her. And that was the beginning of my love affair with music that's still going on today.
Now, I understand your first experience with a live band was the Beatles?
Yeah, it's the first rock band I ever saw live. First music I'd ever heard live. Baltimore Civic Center.
That's cool. And what year was that?
64.
Wow, 1964.
September 13th, 1964.
That's pretty cool, man. So, do you remember most of the details of that concert, or?
Kind of. I was kind of young. What was I, 10 or 11? And I remember looking and seeing all these people, mostly women, and they were all screeching, high screeching screams. And I saw these little guys run on stage with these Beatle boots and their floppy hair, and you could barely hear what they were singing, but you could tell the frenzy, and you could feel the whole charisma of the whole room. And I said to myself, this is what I want to do.
That's cool.
For the rest of my life.
So I'm sure that was your big influence in getting into music, correct?
Yes, I think it was one of the major influences. Like I said, before that, the radio just totally, influenced me, and I fell in love with music first, and then the Beatles.
Right. Now, were you actually an active musician at the time when you saw the Beatles, or were you actually playing any instrument at all, or trying to play?
Oh yeah, I was trying to play. I was. My mom bought me a guitar at 8 years old, and I bought books and I taught myself, and I pulled my little brother Michael off the baseball field, and I told him, I said, you got to play bass. And I taught him twist and shout. And wow, he took it from there because he's one of the greatest bass players I've ever played with.
I can attest to that. I used to be a bass player years ago, and he was one of my big influences, was Michael Sciuto. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, let's skip to the next year, 1965. I understand that the Beatles affiliate manager and lawyer Nat Weiss referred to you as a young protege to Beatles manager Brian Epstein. That's pretty profound.
Yeah, it was exciting. We were doing a battle of the bands, and we won honorable mentions only because we were the youngest kids there. Everyone else was, 16 and older, and we were like 12 and 13.
Yeah. And
I remember I had a black shirt with red polka dots. I was chewing gum, and I had my best Lennon going on, and he picked up on it, and he yelled at me for chewing gum. And I said, well, Lennon chews gum too. And he just laughed. But he wanted me to go to New York and kind of be groomed.
Right.
That's what he said, groomed.
Right.
And my mom wanted me to finish school, so she didn't think it was a good idea. And but I kept in touch with him, through the years, up until my record deal, actually.
Mm-hmm. So he must have really seen something in you.
Yeah, well, he saw something that was already existing in me that never, and it still exists to this day, and it was cool. But I mean, we never actuated it through his. He started an Emperor Records a little later on.
You took some formal training at that time, didn't you?
I went to Peabody Prep actually.
Did you?
And I took classical guitar there, and I also took formalized vocal lessons, jazz guitar lessons from Larry Wooldridge, one of the greatest guitar players. May he rest in peace. He's not with us any longer. Also, Spencer Huffman, who's a fantastic Peabody composer. He taught myself and my brother composition, song form, and that was so helpful in my career.
Absolutely. Now, let's skip to the mid-'70s. It seemed like the mid-'70s was really a breaking out period for you. I understand the Bay City Rollers, who were very, very popular at the time, recorded a song of yours. Is that true?
Yeah, it was the first cover that I'd ever gotten from another artist, and it was a song called My Lisa. And I'll tell you a little story. The very first time I heard it, I was going into the parking lot at the Rotunda, and WCBM, Jay Grayson came on and says, now we're going to play a song from two Baltimore writers. And he said my name and Sammy's name, and they started playing My Lisa, and I started to, break down. I got emotional. It was like my first experience with actually hearing my music come back to me.
Right.
It was great.
That's pretty cool stuff, man. Now, in 1979, Epic Records picked you up as a solo artist.
Yeah, well, they were actually called Portrait Records then, and Hart was on that label, 2020, and a couple other artists. And so, yeah, I got signed to that label, and they were grooming me in our album, the album Island Nights, and right in the middle of the production, the label went under.
They went under?
They went under. So Frankie Rand came in to, he was the head of Epic Records in Los Angeles, and he listened to the album, and I was one of the few albums that was on Portrait that he pulled over to Epic. And he personally remixed a few songs on that album, and we released it.
Now, Tony, you had some major players on that album. You had Peter Noon of Herman and the Hermits. You had Steve Lukather and Mike Porcaro from Toto, and our friend Gary Griffin from the Beach Boys.
Oh, yeah.
How do you get such heavy hitter musicians like that to play on your first album?
That's part of the machine. My producer, who was a dear friend of mine, and he was in my 60s band, the Ravens, in Baltimore. He had left Baltimore at a young age, and he was actually from New York. But he went on to L.A. to become a great writer. And I mean, Steve Dorff, you can Google him. He's done so many great things. And anyway, he happened to be my producer at that time. And he had his finger on every session musician in L.A. So I had L.A.'s finest on that record. Of course, I paid for it.
I can imagine.
It was a great experience. Elvis's drummer, Ronnie Tutt, John Raines, Tom Scott. And I mean, I'd be humming my parts to Tom Scott. When we were doing Butterfly, he was playing the Lyricon, and I was humming and he was going, "Ooh, that sounds like the Beatles." And this is 1979, so I guess maybe the Beatles, in his world, they were kind of corny, but to me, I still loved them. And anyway, he did exactly what I told him to do, and I love it to this day.
Now, that album was huge in Japan.
Yeah, I was lucky. The Japanese, and it wasn't anything to do with the American record company trying to sell it over there, but the Japanese kind of heard that record, and they licensed it from the Americans, from, Epic, Sony in New York, and they put it out, and they put out a totally different single than the U.S., because the U.S. did Cafe LA and then Hold Back the Night. In Japan, they put out Island Nights, and it just went up to top 5, and the album went into the top 10. So I was very fortunate. And then we went over in 1981. We toured the Orient. We did 3 nights in Tokyo. We did Nagoya, Osaka, and Fukuoka.
I remember you telling me years ago that your reception in Japan was almost like a religious experience.
Yeah, back then, because all I'd seen were like Hard Day's Night and Help, and seeing the limousines, and the same thing was happening there. They were just really into American artistry then. Probably not as much now, but I tell you what, in 1981, when I was dropped from the label, that really cooled things off. And it really has, a lot to do with the Japanese love American artistry, but if you're not an American artist anymore, it's really tough.
Now, I understand that your name, Tony Sciuto, is that true? At first, they thought you were actually Japanese?
I don't know. I really don't know. I know it is phonetical, and they are very phonetical, but it's interesting because in 1981, they called me Tony Shoot. They don't even use the toe.
Oh.
And it's funny because this last, not last August, the August before that, 2012, I toured there again, and they called me Tony Shoot. And it was a whole younger, different audience. So I don't even think there was any correlation between but they called me Tony Shoot. I don't know why.
Can we play a cut off the album?
I would love for you to.
What would you like for us to play?
I think it would be apropos to play the Japanese single Island Nights.
All right, let's play it. With the title cut from the album Island Nights, here's Tony Sciuto.
Night tucked in your pocket, neon in your soul, tattooed leather gypsy, you know what your future holds. Soda and that whiskey, burn our saxophone, gently moans, down for a second. Let Broadway sell you for a song. Island nights, you're blinded by the lights. Can't shake those island nights. Hold on tight, don't try to break the ice, or you could lose your life. Oh, island nights. Nothing grows in Harlem, nothing ever will. Music keeps you dancing, now you're all dressed up to kill. Came up from the country, lonely runaway, got to pay, selling it for small change. Just keep you running.
album Island Nights, released in 1980, a top 10 hit in Japan. That was Tony Sciuto with the title track Island Nights. Okay, Tony, now we're talking about the 80s. The first time that I met you, you were in a phenomenal band out of Baltimore called The Pedestrians.
Yeah, it's a band that I kind of put together with my brother and some friends, and I had a vision for that band to look and sound like what I was seeing on MTV, and no other Baltimore band at that time was really doing that.
Right.
So we had the eye makeup, the shoulder pads, the high hair like Duran Duran,
Right.
and the long coats. I mean, us guys look like girls. And I remember when Vicky cut her hair, she looked like a guy. So we were multi-gendering there. But it was an awesome band. I still love that band to this day. And we did some original stuff too.
Right.
And the Willie Nelson competition we won. We flew to Austin and came in second in the country.
Now, one of the things I remember about the band was your band used to do a lot of original music that you had written. One particular song that I used to love to hear you guys play was a song that you wrote. It was called The Last Sound Love Makes. Don Johnson covered that song on his album Heartbeat, correct?
Yeah, my publisher called me one day and said, Don Johnson really loves the song. He says it knocks the socks off. And I guess that was supposed to be a joke because he never wore socks in Miami Vice. But so, yeah, he put it on his album Heartbeat. And, everybody makes fun of him and because he was an actor and his voice is a bit nasally and all that, but I thought he did a damn good job on it. And Dweezil Zappa, that's his first guitar solo. And I see Dweezil sometimes at the NAMM show because I'm a musical rep, and I remind him that. That's like maybe 28 years ago. I can't believe it's that long ago.
And I believe Nigel Olsson, who was Elton John's drummer, recorded some of your songs on his Changing Tides album.
He did a song called Trapeze and a song called Showdown. Now, Showdown was a song that I recorded for the Island Nights album that didn't make the final cut. And he really liked it. And I was particularly excited because when he cut it, Elton played piano on it.
Who else have you worked with as far as, I know you thought you had B.J. Thomas do one of your songs and...
Yeah, B.J. None of these people I actually, was in the studio with.
Right.
When, like Tina Turner, I mean, these people heard my songs and they liked them enough to record them, which was an honor to me. But gosh, there's a lot of other ones, but I don't know how long you want to carry the show out to, but no, I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of people and work with a lot of great people in my time.
That's pretty cool stuff, man. I mean, that's pretty much a musician's dream, is to get to hang out and get to perform with all these top-notch performers.
Well, that's the dream I had when I was 8 years old. I saw the little 45 spinning around, and I just said, I want my name on one of those one day. And I really attained that dream, and that's a great, great feeling.
You're a songwriter. Is there an art to songwriting? Is this something that comes natural to you, or is it something that you labor to do, and after a while you acquire the art of it? Was it always something that came natural to you?
Yeah, I think it came natural to me, but it can be laborsome. And I mean, there is a craft called songwriting, and I see a grid in my head, and I could teach it. Intro, first verse, B section, chorus, re-intro. I mean, you can sculpt it like that, but also a lot of the songs that I write for me, I try to go outside of those lines, so it's real and it's different. But there are no real rules or lines.
Right.
Your ear will tell you.
Right, absolutely. And it just seems like some people have a knack for songwriting, some people don't. It just seems like you have the knack. Also understand, you even write jingles for commercials and...
Oh, since 1980, my first one was Sound Waves, Were Music to Your Ears.
I remember that one. Sure.
And my biggest hit in commercials is We Built This Bank Just for You, First Mariner Bank.
I remember that one too, sure.
I've done Big Screen Store, Oh gosh, I don't want to get that. That'll be a whole nother hour.
Right.
And I'm still doing them. I just did York Insurance Services in Bel Air.
Now, as far as doing movie scores, you've done some movie scores as well.
Well, yeah, it's not where I'm commissioned to write for a movie. It's just that a musical supervisor will pick my song, and they usually end up in credit rolls. I have the credit roll to an All American Murder with Christopher Walken, and it's a song called "Out of the Darkness." It just kicks in right at the end when they do the credit roll. And it's really cool because it's an up-tempo rock and roll song, and I've gotten really close with other ones. Steve Dorff and I wrote a beautiful song that was going to be in a Nicolas Cage movie about Christmas. It didn't make, A Family Man. It just at the last minute got kicked off for a Seal song. So, I mean, things like that happen all the time.
Right,
right.
right.
I've gotten this close so many times. And then a lot of times things happen. So,
Do you feel that the drive for success kind of overrides the fear of rejection?
well, I don't really do it to obtain success. God knows that financially, if I just decided to be a songwriter and a performer, I would, barely be living. I have a day job. I'm a musical sales representative for a bunch of manufacturers that manufacture musical instruments. And I balance that and my jingle writing and my performing. I have a band, a rock band, and I do a duo, and I release CDs in Japan still.
Right.
So, it's just a balance of a bunch of things. And when you love something, you don't give it up,
Correct.
you know.
Yeah, Tony, I remember a time in the mid-'80s, your band, The Pedestrians, was playing live at a club outside of Baltimore, and I was with a bunch of friends, and one of my female friends spotted John Stamos in the crowd. I remember John was with Gary Griffin at the time. The two of them came in the club. And I was just, from that point, it always intrigued me. How in the heck did you become friends with John Stamos? And then, as fate would have it, you ended up being a member of Jesse and the Rippers on the television show Full House with John.
I think it was 1984. I was playing in Las Vegas. I was called to start a 60s band at the Dunes, which no longer exists. But I had this little 60s British pop band playing in the lobby, and they had speakers blowing out onto the boulevard of our music. And we were doing just all 60s stuff. But anyway, my friend Gary Griffin, who I'd met earlier, he played on the Island Nights record. In 84, of course, was after the Island Nights album. He brought John Stamos in because he wanted him to listen to his friend play music. And John and I just got on right away because he loved the Beatles, he loved the Beach Boys, and he loved Elvis. I mean, he's such, an Elvis fan. And I dig Elvis too, but I like the Elvis, like the 50s, late 50s Elvis, but I was too young to know who he was back then.
Right.
I only learned about that afterwards. But we kept in touch, and then back, late in the 80s, he called us out, my brother and I, and Tasso, a friend of ours, to do
Tasso Cassos.
to
Right.
do the one of the Full House shows. And after that, I went on to do other ones myself. John would ask me to come on, and John also said, we used to have lunches, and we used to talk about my life, because my real life, I was raising two daughters, I was playing rock and roll, touring the world, and I had a wife, and he was going, how do you do it? Because what you're doing in real life, I'm doing on camera.
Correct.
So I was giving him ideas. And one of the TV shows was he goes to Japan and he has a hit record. And, his wife wants him to quit. And that was really about my life. And I played bass in that episode. So I was playing the part of Michael Sciuto.
I saw that when you were on Jimmy Fallon, you were playing bass. I'm not used to seeing you playing bass. I'm used to seeing your brother, Michael Sciuto, not Tony Sciuto.
Yeah,
but-
well, Lanny Cordoba, who was his guitar player, is an old school friend of John's, and he's a great guy. He's a great musician. That whole band, the sax player that was on the Fallon show with us was Richie Canada. He played for Billy Joel, the Beach Boys. He's been around for years. He's
Cool.
a wonderful saxist. And, of course, Gary Griffin and myself. It was star-studded, and Tasso, and we were all rippers. Everyone in that band were a ripper at one time or another.
So it was authentic rippers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was fun. And Jimmy Fallon was so excited. That was the coolest thing for me, because he was like a little kid. Like, man, I can't wait till you guys play.
And I heard the reviews were outstanding.
Yeah, it was cool. We've had almost 3 million hits on YouTube. So that's cool.
I heard you also, or you may have upstaged Paul McCartney when he was on the show.
Well, I equate that to when you think about the people who watch the Fallon show, it's the younger crowd. And John was smart in doing the Jesse and the Ripper thing now, opposed to before this, because all of his Full House listeners and watchers are now in their 30s and they're watching Fallon. So it made so much sense. And that would be so much more relevant than, Paul McCartney and the Beatles are older people that probably aren't watching the show,
Right. Now let's skip ahead here. The Little River Band, one of my all-time favorite bands. How did you ever end up being a member of the Little River
And that's
Band?
a funny story too. Also in 1984, when I was living out in L.A. for a while with my manager, and he was friends with Derek Pellicci, who was their original drummer and one of the original founders. And we were trying to write together because Derek was trying to break into the American scene as a writer, and we might have written a couple things, but nothing notably. So he went back to Australia, and I went back to Baltimore, and all of a sudden, years later, 1989, I get a call in the middle of the night, because they're opposite sides of the world.
Absolutely.
He goes, and he calls me Tony, but with his accent, it's Tiny. He goes, Tiny, I reckon I want you to join the band. I go, huh? He goes, I reckon I want you to play keyboards, mate. Keyboards. I said, well, I play a little bit of keyboards, but I'm mainly a guitar player. Nah, you can play keyboards, mate. I'm going to send you a cassette, and you're going to learn the songs and be in the band. And so he did. And I tell you, I listened to this cassette, and I was listening to these songs, Take It Easy on Me, Man on Your Mind. I said, man, I used to love these songs, but I never knew who they were by,
Right.
because they're, I never really put a face on a Little River Band except for reminiscing.
Right.
So I fell in love with the music, and I started fooling around with it. I said, you know what? I'm going to kick myself into this. And I did.
So you push yourself into the project pretty much.
Oh, yeah. And they flew me to Australia. We were rehearsing for a few weeks, and Warren Zevon was with us.
Warren Zevon.
He was doing our middle of the show sets, where I was his keyboard player too. We were doing Where Was the London, Excitable Boy.
So you played for Warren Zevon?
Yeah, he was awesome.
Oh, man, another one of my favorites, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't that privy to him at that time, but he was such a profound guy. I mean, he was just he didn't say much, but when he said something, it meant volumes. And it was a fantastic experience for me.
And how many years were you with the Little River Band?
I was with those guys for like 8 years.
8 years. Yeah. And then from there you went to Player, which is another band that I really liked a lot.
Well, the original lead singer and guitar player, the guy who wrote Baby Come Back, is a good friend of mine, Peter Beckett.
Absolutely.
We met in around same time, 1984 in L.A. as songwriters. My publishing company put me with him to write. And again, we didn't write anything notably, but we joined Little River Band together inadvertently. I mean, it wasn't like connected at all.
Right.
It was just happenstance and ironic. And we were just buddies the whole 8 years. We were like, the odd couple. He's a great guy and a great songwriter, great singer. we left the group at the same time. So when we left the group at the same time, he called me up and said, "Hey, mate, I want you to play with our band." So he would fly me out there for certain gigs, and I was in Player for a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, let's rewind for a second here. Could you tell us about the time when you were with Epic Records and you received a phone call to report to the LA office?
I flew to Japan and I did the whole Orient, and we set it on fire. And telexes were sent back saying, "Oh, Tony Sciuto band, fantastic," all that stuff. And my chest was pumped up. I was feeling good. Little girls were chasing my limousine, throwing roses at me. And then all of a sudden, it was in L.A. where I went to Century City to have, a meeting with Frankie Rand, the head of the company. And as I approached the meeting, the door was closed. Obviously, he was finishing up a meeting. So all of a sudden, the door swings open and Ringo Starr walks out the door with Barbara Bach. And he looks me up and down and he says, "I hope you have better luck than me." And, I didn't know what he meant until I got into the office. And obviously I didn't, because I was told I was no longer with the label, but he was cut just shortly before.
So I guess that day was just they started cutting people off the label.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I can't imagine somebody walking out and it's Ringo Starr and he's giving you a statement like that. It's like, oh boy,
Well, it was cool to finally meet a Beatle. I've met George Martin a few times because George also produced Little River Band. But to meet Ringo was great, and I wasn't really paying attention to what he said because I was just in awe of meeting him. But then when it all kind of made sense to me, what didn't make sense to me was getting dropped from the label when we did great over there. But when you look at the demographics and everything, the ball of wax, Japan is a small market, and it really didn't constitute me staying with an American company.
But from what I understand is you're still selling CDs in Japan.
Yeah, I'm still releasing. I've released about 4 or 5 CDs since then. And I've released Island Nights. I don't know how many times. I've lost count. But they keep selling out every time I release them.
Well, that's great.
I've sold more Island Nights after it was released by Epic than Epic did,
So you took it upon yourself to...
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't hold an artist's material hostage.
Right.
Do
you find that happens a lot in the industry where you write your own song, it's yours from your heart, from your soul, but then once the record company gets a hold of it, they say, no, we have ownership of it? Or
Well, that was back in those days. That's when, I really got inducted into the record business after all the good stuff happened.
Right.
After all the Clive Davises who found Dylan, who found Janis Joplin, Simon and Garfunkel, and let those guys develop through the years so they would become the icons that they are.
Right.
When my album came out, it had every indication that it was beginning of a developmental sound, but they didn't give it a chance.
All right, Tony, tell us about your current project.
I have, I'm releasing a new CD of new material. That's, when I say new, it's from the last couple of years, and something that I recorded and produced with my engineer, Arnold Gare.
Sure, I know Arnold.
Arnie. And
he's excellent.
Yes, he is. And it's an album, or we call them albums because that's where we come from.
Right.
But they call them CDs now, and it's called Under the Radar. And it's an interesting story. A friend of mine sent me a sound file, and he said, "Tony, you got to listen to this radio show. It was on, and I caught it, and I called the radio station and got a copy of it. I want you to hear it." So I turn on the sound file, and it's this guy on a local college radio station having a show, asking a question, saying, all right, out there, you listeners, I want to ask you a question about a Baltimore artist who has been able to tie in the Bay City Rollers, Don Johnson, Jesse and the Rippers, and the Little River Band all together And then he went on to say, given all these songs that I've written for other artists,
Right.
and the Jesse and the Rippers on Full House and Little River Band. And then he said, Tony Sciuto, if you said Tony Sciuto, you're right. This guy's been under the radar for 30 years. And in my head, it went, ping, that's it. I got to write that song. So that was the beginning of my new CD. And it's, basically, I feel like I've really been flying way under the radar in the industry. But that's okay. Just so I get to do what I set out to do, and my music is played all over the world. When I get royalty statements quarterly and I see all the places, there's not a place in the world that my stuff isn't playing. I mean, I'm not making $1 million out of it, but it's cool. Spain, Chile, Australia, Japan, in places I've never been or can't even imagine,
Right.
It's interesting.
Now, how many countries have you performed in?
Wow.
You ever take an account?
No, I haven't really, but it's Australia, New Zealand. I've been to Singapore, which is Indonesia, Germany, England. I'm of course, U.S.
Right.
I did San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I'm sure I've missed plenty in there because you're talking about many, many culminating decades of performing.
So tell us about your new CD. How many cuts are on the CD?
Well, there's 8 cuts on the CD. There's a ghost cut, which is cut number 9, but it's not really on the actual cover.
Right.
It's a remix that Arnie did of one of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
The CD starts out kind of 60s popish, goes into a 70s funk thing, goes into a Tony Sciuto type of a ballad, maybe Peter Gabriel-ish a little bit.
Right.
And then it goes into a blues song. And then it goes into a bunch of beach songs. And I can't tell you why. All I can say is, I wrote the lyrics. They're dear to my heart. There's stories in every song about my life. And
Right.
And the last song, although it's not one that's, if you listen to it, it's very low key,
Mm-hmm.
but it's called On the Chesapeake Bay, and it's written about, our heritage here.
Right, because we're both from Maryland. We're from the Chesapeake Bay area. And
Years ago, I remember John Stamos saying, Tony, you know how lucky you are to live on Chesapeake Bay? The fresh oysters and the crab, the blue crab. He loves blue crab.
Oh, yeah.
And it never dawned on me back then because I grew up with it, and it was like you took it for granted.
Right.
And but now that I'm older, I wanted to reflect that in my music. And so that's an important song for me.
As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, Steve Ilianis, who owns Bill's Terrace Inn in Essex, Maryland, I told him about John Stamos, who's also Greek, his love for crabs, and he's known for having the best in the area. He invited, he said, make sure John knows when he comes to Baltimore, I got my jumbo crabs for him, and they'll be taken care of. So
we should think about that because, John still has crabs flown out to him from here.
let's play something off your new CD.
Why don't we do Under the Radar?
Okay, let's do that. Under the Radar, from the album Under the Radar, Mr. Tony Sciuto.
I'm on my way to play some rock and roll.
I spend my life behind a microphone stand, shouting as loud as I can. I spend my nights searching with a shallow heart. In the morning, I'll be falling apart. Don't need no fame, no sidewalk, Hollywood star. 'Cause I ain't over the hill, just under the radar. My religion is rock and roll. Lennon gave me rubber soul. I was classified
Under the Radar, Tony Sciuto. Man, I love the groove of that song. Great job on that. Let's play another one.
I'd like to play Counting Every Heartbeat, and it's a more mellow song, but it has my good buddy, Gary Griffin, playing accordion.
Accordion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which he's also played for the Beach Boys on their albums.
Cool. All right. Mr. Tony Sciuto.
Fear in my blood got me throwing punches at the shadows on the walls. Time like a thief, steal away your breath till you don't breathe at all. Walk in a straight line, my jagged past got me running blind. Girl, here's a man in pain so desperately just searching for truth. Girl, here's a man who stands so patiently waiting my cue, counting every heartbeat till I get to you. The time is now, time to live up to all the promises we vowed. Lay down your soul, lay it onto mine, and we can freeze in time. Is this our last chance? We will not know until we dance the dance. Girl, here's a man in pain so desperately just searching for truth. Girl, here's a man who stands so patiently waiting my cue, counting every heartbeat till I get to you. Girl, here's a man in pain so desperately just searching for truth. Girl, here's a man who stands so patiently waiting my cue. Counting every heartbeat, counting every heartbeat till I get to you. Counting every
From the CD Under the Radar, that's Tony Sciuto with Counting Every Heartbeat. So, Tony, do you have any information on the release of this CD? Also, I heard there may be a possible tour in the future.
Well, it's a possibility. Nothing on paper yet.
Right.
But, Under the Radar and live in Japan at the Cotton Club, in August of 2012, Vivid Sound Records, who I'm signed with, who releases my music,
Right.
they flew my band over to Tokyo, and we did 7 shows in 4 nights, which was so amazingly hard to do. You know, it was the first show was one night was the first show, and then every night after that, double show, and then next day on a plane. Whew, a long flight, that is.
My goodness.
And but anyway, so we're going to release that live performance on a CD with Under the Radar my studio album,
Cool.
and I'm hoping, and we're all hoping that constitutes another tour.
Right.
And they're small tours. They're not. I'm not playing Budokan or anything like that.
Right.
Just playing really cool little clubs, kind of like Ram's Head Tavern type of a situation.
Right. Now, people can go to your website, TonySciuto.com, for all this information.
Yes, .com, or I have CDBaby .com/Tony Sciuto, where you can purchase my CDs, and ReverbNation.com/Tony Sciuto.
That's awesome stuff. All right. Well, I want to thank tonight's guest, the multi-talented Mr. Tony Sciuto.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Please visit his website, TonySciuto.com. That's it for us. For Who's Who Tonight, I'm Mark Bishop. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Who's Who Tonight with Mark Bishop. Visit us on YouTube and on Facebook, or go to our website, who'swhotonight.com.